I've been an adventure creator for about 5 years now, and it's my full-time job, and I shoot about 90% of my images on this one setup. Hi, my name's Danny, and I'm an adventure creator from a remote part of Canada called the Yukon. I've been an adventure creator for the past 5 years, and it is my full-time job. I work with brands like Solomon, Canon, Garmin, really cool outdoor companies that I'm super grateful to work for. My main platform is over on Instagram, and I always get asked about what camera setup I use, and I feel like I have so much to say about it, so that's why I created this video, because photography is really subjective. It is about like what you're shooting, how you're shooting, your own personal style, the way you like to edit your photos. So hopefully I can explain my thinking and reasoning behind all that while sharing with you how I shoot, because I don't think this setup works for everyone, but it works really well for me and I want to share why. But before I get into that, I feel like I need to explain a bit of my story as a photographer and how I got to where I am and what I like doing. If you have any questions, leave in the comments below, because I would love to make more videos like this and your comments inspire what I create next. The way I like to create is authentically going on an adventure and documenting it, whether it's backcountry skiing, going hiking to an alpine lake. You're both living the story and capturing it. For me, adventure photography is capturing a feeling and experience in a story, and it's really personal to me. From the way I edit to the compositions that I try to shoot and the actions, I try to capture what I'm feeling. So I really prioritize having a setup that is extremely durable, versatile, resilient, has a good battery life for being out on trips for multiple days, and can handle the conditions that I'm in. I know some people only like to be behind the camera, but I think it's okay to want to be both behind and in front of the camera, because you are a part of the story. When I try to capture adventures, you're capturing both landscapes, people, action, and detailed shots, especially if you are working with brands, which I do. So I like to be able to capture details of like the shoes that I'm wearing or the tent that I'm using, because that is how I make my money as a creator. Telling a story as an adventure photographer is capturing not just one perfect shot. It's capturing both the struggles and the highlights, as well as capturing the environment that you're in and your relationship to the environment. There's so many elements to it, and I think that's what makes it super interesting, because everyone can have their own unique perspective on it as well. There's not one right way to capture your adventure. And a bit of a backstory of how I got into photography. I actually grew up always doing photography. My dad used to be a photographer, and one of my first cameras was the Canon T5i. And that thing taught me so much. I just shot on a 50mm lens, and I took it everywhere with me. I always found photography was a passion of mine and an outlet, but I always told myself that it wasn't something I could make my job. I don't know why. I think it's partly because I live in a remote place where it wasn't anyone's job, or like very few people's. So I just didn't really know what was out there. I've done a lot of odd jobs as a photographer. Like I've shot weddings, I've done portraits, I've done events. And the thing that I didn't enjoy about those jobs was I never felt like I was shooting what I wanted to be shooting. I felt like I was shooting what other people wanted, which is why I eventually realized doing adventure photography is what makes me happy. Yeah, this is kind of a tangent. Anyways, so how I actually got started as a creator was I applied to this program called Canon Futures, and it was for basically young creators or photographers. And it was this program where you could apply, and if you're accepted, you would get mentored for a year under like a bunch of really cool people that are successful in the industry. So I applied on that, and I really didn't think I was going to get in, but for some reason I got in. That was quite pivotal in my career, because I really didn't think it would be possible for me to make photography into my job and being a creator. But I asked someone that was a part of the Canon Futures program, and he said, just start posting like every day and see what happens. And I took that advice, and sure enough, like after 2 months, my page on Instagram started to grow, and I just kept up with it, and it turned into my full-time job, which I'm so grateful for, because this is truly what I'm passionate about. I love sharing the Yukon. I love sharing our adventures. It's a form of art and expression for me. It's July, and I think it's like 5 degrees outside. It feels like it might snow. It's so cold. So this is my main setup, which is the Canon R5 with the 24-70 f2.8 lens. I primarily use this setup for photography. If you follow me on Instagram, a lot of the videos that I post there are just shot on my iPhone because I just find the setup is quicker to work with. I usually just like shoot and edit on my phone, and it's just more streamlined. Whereas for photos, I just love taking photos on my camera. I feel like I don't really like the way iPhone photos turn out. I choose the 24-70 because I feel like I can capture a good variety of angles. Whereas if I were to just have a wide angle on it or just a telephoto, you're kind of restricted to a certain perspective, and maybe some people like that, but that's just my personal opinion. I do use other lenses, but if I were to just grab one, it would be the 24-70. And sometimes that's the case when it comes to adventures. Like if you're doing something that's really rugged and you don't want to be adding pounds of camera gear to your body, I often normally just go for one camera and one lens, and Jake and I share, and that's how we capture our adventure. I feel like the only modifications I've done to this camera is just leaving a polarizer on it. I don't even know the brand of my polarizer. It's extremely beaten up. You can see that there's a dent in the polarizer. The reason why I leave it on is, well, one, I'm constantly losing lens cap, and sometimes I just get annoyed with them and like don't even put them on my camera. So it protects the lens, but I'm often in settings where I'm either in water, mountains, or snow, and the polarizers actually really cut through some of that reflection and glare, and as well as haze. So I just leave it on, and I feel like it's become a part of my look when it comes to creating. The polarizer is also like insanely scratched and normally has like fingerprints on it, and the purest photographers will hate me for saying this, but I actually like the look of it. It will sometimes create like some sun flares and kind of gives it like a vintage lens look. Unintentional. I really like to create the feeling of like nostalgia and not just have like a perfectly exposed, perfectly focused, perfectly sharp photo. That's not really my vibe. I'm not going to go into specs because I feel like there's a ton of really detailed camera reviews, and if you want to learn about the specific specs of the camera, you can look there. But I'm more talking about my experience as a photographer and why I choose certain gear. So the reason why I like the R5 is, well, one, it is an extremely durable camera and it's been through a lot. There's a lot of scars, some dents, some scuffing. A funny story, I actually was shooting the Northern Lights at a hot spring, and it was about -30. So it was pretty cold out and it was dark. And I accidentally kicked over my tripod and my camera went like swan diving into the hot springs at -30 Celsius. I immediately took it out when I realized, and the camera froze. Like it basically turned into an ice cube. And I really thought that was the end of the camera. And it was quite stressful because I was actually leaving in like 3 or 4 days to go shoot a job with Canon, and I needed this camera to be able to shoot the job. So I was freaking out because you also can't just buy cameras where I live. Like there's not really a photography store. I opened up all like the gates and stuff like that, and the last thing you want to do is turn on the camera if it's been in water. Let it sit for like over a day, tried turning it on, nothing happened. Opened it up and like flipped it over. We tried it in rice, that didn't help. Left it sit for a long time. Went to go turn it on and it came back to life. So I feel like, yeah, this camera is super rugged, and if we can get through that, I feel like we can get through a lot, because that's like going from extreme hot to extreme cold. I really like this camera too because, well, I've been shooting on it for a really long time, and I feel like the longer you shoot with the camera, the better you know its capability. And that really helps you when you are shooting in all kinds of lighting scenarios and harsh conditions, and the last thing you want to think about is, how do I get to these settings? Will I be able to use these images if it's like really bright or like really dark? So knowing your camera really well, having a ton of repetitions of shooting on it and editing it and kind of learning how maybe certain lighting conditions or even colors worked really well for that camera versus sometimes it doesn't work well. So I feel like the capabilities of this camera, I mean, the file sizes are huge and I really love to edit. So I can be shooting like broad daylight, because sometimes you have to as an adventure photographer, like Obviously you want to wait for golden hour or whatever, but that doesn't always happen, and you should be able to shoot in any lighting conditions. So I find myself, especially with the midnight sun, I'm shooting in like harsh midday sun with shadows like most of the day, and I feel like I'm able to work with that. Like there's really intense highlights and shadows, and for the most part it doesn't look blown out, it doesn't look too like contrasty. I'm able to make it work. So I really like this camera for that, like the dynamic range and how big the file sizes are, despite how annoying it is that you go through so much storage. I've been shooting on Canon since I was like a kid, so the layout is just like second nature to me, but I find just the way it feels in my hand is so intuitive. Like the buttons are where I want it to be. When I pick up someone else's camera, like a Sony or something like that, it just feels weird. I feel like I forget how to use a camera when I try to use other people's cameras. Prior to this camera, I was shooting on a Canon 80D, and that was back when there was DSLRs, before everything went mirrorless. And I think one of the biggest changes that I really appreciated about switching to this camera was the viewfinder. So it's an electronic viewfinder, and it also accurately shows you what the exposure is. So you don't really have to do things like metering anymore, which is really helpful if you are also shooting with people that don't know camera settings, because they can see like, oh, this looks really dark. Are you sure you want your camera to take photos like this? Whereas before, when I've tried to shoot with friends that didn't have any camera experience and involved metering, it was kind of a guessing game if it would work out. So a bit more about the lens. What I think is kind of interesting about consistently shooting mostly on one lens is it's also become a part of my style as a creator. I feel like it's kind of helped create my own visual identity, whereas if I was switching cameras a lot and lenses a lot, it might have been harder for me to find that. Something that I really love about the R5, but Canon in general, and I know this is a very cliche thing to say, but it's the colors. I have shot with other friends that use different setups, and I think it's something that you would get used to. But just from an editing perspective, I like the colors that come out of this camera, and I find them really easy to work with. Whereas with other brands, I found it a bit more challenging to get the desired look I was going for. So for that reason, I also have just stayed loyal to Canon, because I love the way that the colors turn out. I think what like really upgraded was the ability to shoot in low light conditions. So like blue out, I'm able to crank the ISO and still take handheld photos, whereas previously I totally needed a tripod, and I don't like carrying a tripod with me for the most part. So low light capabilities of it are really good. They aren't quite as good as I believe Sony and maybe Lumix, where you can like really crank it. So it would be nice, especially for a video perspective. I don't do a ton of video, but I would love to be able to film the northern lights on this camera. And I'd say unless it's like a really like crazy aurora storm, it's hard to get good footage. The photos are still really good. I think a couple really helpful features is they have like this little screen up here that just tells you your settings. You can get the right settings in the dark. This is really nice, especially in the cold, where just for the sake of the battery life, I try to not have the screen out all the time. So I'm able to look here and see my settings really quickly. Viewfinder, amazing. It's so bright and it is really accurate to what the exposure is, which is really helpful if you've ever shot like in the middle of the day when the sun is super bright and you like genuinely are like, I have no idea if this photo is properly exposed, because you just can't see your screen properly. So that is awesome. I feel like if I am shooting like a ton, I try and bring a battery a day. There's trips where I'm out for like almost a week and I'm just not shooting as much, and I will maybe go through like 2 or 3 batteries. If you're winter camping, I try to store my batteries inside my sleeping bag when I'm sleeping, just so they aren't freezing overnight. But even then, like we've gone winter camping, I wake up, this camera is like literally frosty, and the battery's still good. And yeah, so I think the Canon batteries are really resilient in the cold, which I appreciate a lot. Like I don't really notice any significant drop in its performance. Storage, okay, I feel like storage is You just need to go for really big cards if you get this camera, because the file size is like, what, 50 megabytes-ish? So you go through the storage pretty quickly. For that reason, I wouldn't recommend always shooting on burst mode. I use like the continuous shooting mode, but I don't necessarily have it on the fastest version of that, especially if you're shooting with other people and you're like, I would love like a photo here, just take a bunch. You want to like rein in how many frames you're getting, because that is how you would fill up a card. I think maybe the one con of the setup would probably just be the weight and the size. It would be nice to have something a little bit smaller. Quite a bit lighter would be great, but I think the trade-off of having like an extremely durable camera is still worth it. Like I'm so rough with this camera. I put it on the ground. I normally just hike with it like in my hands, or I have one of the Peak Design clips. I don't always like the Peak Design clips though, because with this lens being like a little bit bigger, it kind of like bounces against your rib cage. Sometimes I get bruising here. So I find myself kind of holding it anyways. So sometimes I'm just, carrying it. I just don't really use like a camera cube. I kind of just toss it in there with all my gear, and I try to pad it with like some things, but I am not the person that like babies my gear. I obviously try and look after it, but I do believe that when you're doing these kind of trips, you can't just bring a ton of extra storage for your camera for the sake of looking after it. It should just be rugged enough. But I do find if you have it like stowed away, then you won't necessarily be as inclined to take photos. If you're trying to get to a certain place by a certain time, stopping and taking your camera out of your bag is really inefficient. So I think having it in your hands or somewhere accessible is the best way to carry your camera. There are now much lighter, much more compact camera setups that I kind of envy, but ultimately, if I were to choose one thing, I like this camera the most because I can just rely on it. I know that I will get the shots that I want and things will turn out. But because of this being pretty heavy, I actually started using my old ELPH HS something rather Canon like little point and shoot camera, and I loved it, and then I broke it, and then shooting with little old digital cameras became really popular, and then they became really hard to get. So then I looked to get the Canon G7X. This is the Mark II, and this is a really fun camera to have because it is just really light and pocket friendly. And what I like about it is carrying this around can get annoying, and it's also a bit in your face. So I really like this for like much more informal or spontaneous settings where I might feel like taking photos or I might not, or I'm with like a big group of people. Like as a creator, I now get invited to go on group trips with people or brands, and I just feel like this feels like a production when I'm carrying this around, whereas this just feels less intimidating. For that reason, I do enjoy having this a part of my tools. One of my favorite things about this camera is the flash, and I feel like it gives it such a nostalgic look, and that has been really fun to play with. So I actually started playing with a bigger flash to put on this camera too. Yeah, I just really enjoy this style. It has like a nostalgic feeling. I'll bring it in scenarios where I really just don't feel like carrying a big camera with me, which has been really nice also to have two different cameras, because I feel like this helped me shoot things that I wouldn't normally shoot. Like, for example, I went on a ski trip with a friend in Whistler, and we were just skiing the resort, and it was mostly just for fun, but it was fun to be able to, like, when the sun came out, we took a couple photos on here, and it was just very spontaneous. Whereas when I carry this, it has to be in a backpack or something like that to be able to go skiing with it. I would say that I actually think the lens is a little bit more important than the body. When I first bought the R5, I was really reluctant to buy the 24-70 because that was like a lot of money all at once. So I just got like, I think a 35 mil or a 50. And I quickly realized, I was like, well, I'm just super limited with having that one lens. Buy within your means. I think Canon especially has like a really good range of mirrorless cameras now where you can really find one for your price point. Like we did a whole campaign around the Canon R8, and I was really impressed with the quality of that camera. And it's a full frame, and it's still expensive, but it's pretty affordable for full frame mirrorless camera. So yeah, I would pick a body within your means and get the lens that you want, if that helps. And then some frequently asked like general photo questions. What do I edit on? So I edit in Lightroom. People always ask me about presets. Maybe I'll launch my own presets at some point. Keep on going back and forth if I want to do that. But I've kind of created my own presets over the years and just tweak them a little bit. But there are times where you have to kind of do custom settings for a scene because the colors are really specific or the lighting's really specific. So photography, I don't really use any photo apps on my phone. I always edit in Lightroom desktop. I don't really like the mobile version. But when it comes to video, I do shoot most of my video for social media on my phone. I will edit in InShot is like my preferred app, but I always edit in the photo library and in InShot. Like I think it really helps if you can color correct the footage in the photo library first before importing it into like an editing app, because I think it just maintains the colors better. That's my personal opinion. I don't really know if there's any truth behind that. Okay, next question. How do I shoot my photos? So I always shoot in manual. I feel like I've just gotten to know this camera so well and settings that I'm really fast with making adjustments. If you are shooting as a beginner, I totally recommend like playing around with AV mode, like aperture priority, shutter priority, and learning how that affects the look of your photos. Kind of like learning one setting at a time and then going to manual, because it can be really overwhelming to learn like what ISO is, what shutter speed, what aperture is all at once. Jake is still learning. I do own other lenses and camera bodies, so if I'm not shooting with this setup, like for example right now where I have a camera shooting me with my camera, currently it's recording on the Canon R with the 15-35 lens, and then I have recently gotten a Fuji XV100, whatever the name of that camera is, and I'm still getting to know it. I think there's times where I like it and times where I don't like it. So I haven't like really gravitated towards that camera as much as I was hoping I would, which might be a controversial take because I know people really love that camera. But yeah, I just find like it's very situational if I choose to use that camera. And then in terms of lenses, I think it's called the trifecta or something like that, where we have the 15-35, the 24-70, and the 70-200. But we also have, shoot, I'm blanking on the, is it 200-500? Okay, I can't remember. I'll just throw it in after the fact. We have a big telephoto lens, shoot like wildlife on, and I think it's 300-500. I'm really bad with numbers, and then I have all my old cameras still, but the ones that we use the most is the Canon R5. Okay, let's go hike.